Shalom to everybody. We are back from our lunch break. Having enjoyed going through Vayikra 19 and 20, we are going to now look at Yeshayahu 66 and then at Amos 9 verse 7 to 15. Who'd like to read? You're going to read?
Thus said Yahweh, the heavens are my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where is this house that you build for me, and where is the place of my rest? And all these my hand has made, and all these that exist, declares Yahweh. Yet to such a one I look, on him who is poor and bruised of spirit, and who trembles at my word. But whoever slays the bull strikes a man, whoever slaughters the lamb breaks a dog's neck, whoever brings a grain offering, pig's blood, whoever burns incense blesses an idol. Indeed, they have chosen their own ways, and their being delights in their abominations. I shall also choose their punishments, and bring their fears on them. Because I called, but no one answered. I spoke, and they did not hear. And they did evil before my eyes, and chose what was displeasing to me. Hear the word of Yahweh, you who tremble at his word. Your brothers who hate you, who cast you out for my name's sake, said, Let Yahweh be esteemed, so that we see your joy. But they are put to shame. A roaring sound from the city, a voice from the Hechal, the voice of Yahweh, repaying his enemies. Before she labored, she gave birth. Before a pain came to her, she was delivered of a male child. Who has heard the like of this? Who has seen the like of these? Is a land brought forth in one day? Is a nation born at once? For as soon as Zion labored, she gave birth to her children. Shall I bring to birth and not give delivery? Said Yahweh. Shall I who give delivery restrain birth? Said your Elohim. Rejoice with Jerusalem, and be glad with her, all you who love her. Rejoice greatly with her, all you who mourn for her. So that you feed, and shall be satisfied with the breast of her comforts, so that you drink deeply, and shall delight yourselves in her overflowing esteem. For thus said Yahweh, See, I am extending peace to her like a river, and the esteem of the nations like a flowing stream. And you shall feed, you shall be carried on the side, and be fondled on her knees. As one whom his mother comforts, so I comfort you, and in Jerusalem you are comforted. And you shall see, and your heart shall rejoice, and your bones flourish as tender grass. And the hand of Yahweh shall be known to his servants, and his displeasure to his enemies. For look, Yahweh comes with fire and with his chariots, like a whirlwind, to render his displeasure with burning, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire and by his sword Yahweh shall judge all flesh, and the slain of Yahweh shall be many. Those who set themselves apart and cleanse themselves at the gardens after one in the midst, eating flesh of pigs and the abomination and the mouse, are snatched away together, declares Yahweh. And I, because of their works and their imaginations, am coming to gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my esteem. And I shall set a sign among them, and shall send some of those who escape to the nations, Tarshish and Pul and Lud, who draw the bow, and Tuval and Yawan, the coastlands afar off, who have not heard my report nor seen my esteem. And they shall declare my esteem among the nations. And they shall bring all your brothers as an offering to Yahweh out of all the nations, on horses and in chariots and in litters, on mules and on camels, to my set-apart mountain Jerusalem, declares Yahweh, as the children of Israel bring an offering in a clean vessel into the house of Yahweh. And from them too I shall take for priests, for Levites, declares Yahweh. For as the new heavens For as the new heavens and the new earth that I make stand before me, declares Yahweh, so your so your seed and your name shall stand. And it shall be that from new moon to new moon, and from Sabbath to Sabbath, all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares Yahweh. And they shall go forth and look upon the corpses of the men who have transgressed against me, for their worm shall not die, and their fire not be quenched, and they shall be repulsive to all flesh.
Okay, so this passage is such a wonderful passage for us that ends the book of Yeshayahu. It contains a couple of messages, or many messages, but it kind of contains the comforting encouragement for the humble who tremble at the word of Yahweh, but along with it comes the clear warning of judgment against the wicked, the proud and lofty ones, who are clearly rejecting the need to submit to walking in the Torah of Elohim. And it reaffirms Yahweh's establishment, his reign here on earth, where we hope that we have the hope that of his return being confirmed fully in us, being made changed in the twinkling of an eye, and the destruction of the wrong being made very clear as proper set apart worship will be observed in his reign, and it will be firmly established here on earth. Now, when it says here in verse 1 that Yahweh, the heavens are his throne and the earth is his footstool. And he says, where is this house that you built for me? And where is this place of my rest? Now, we must understand, this is long after David and Shlomo. Remember, it was in David's heart to build a house. And Yahweh said, have I ever asked your fathers to build me a house when he went with them through the wilderness? But here now, after many of the sovereigns during the days of Yeshayahu, we know it was the wicked King Manasseh that put Yeshayahu to death. But here during this time, through a series of kings, good, bad, while the house of Israel did not have any good kings. And Yahweh's asking, where is this house that you built for me? Because it was in David's heart to do it. And he said, it's good, but you're a man of blood. Your son's going to do it. And Shlomo built this temple that was well provided for, but it had corrupted itself because he prayed to Yahweh and he asked Yahweh that if people leave and they pray toward this place, that he'd hear their prayer, heal the land, bring them back. And Yahweh said, if they do that, I will, because Yahweh already told Israel before they even entered the land through Moshe, you're going to go away. I'm going to scatter you, but I'm going to bring you back. So here at this time, when they should have been worshipping in spirit and truth, they should have been serving Yahweh in his temple that's complete, set apart before his eyes, but yet they were mixing with the nations, corrupting their worship. So the house that they assumed now to be the temple, I mean, they allowed enemies to come take some of the gold and come take parts. Even Chizkiyahu, when Yeshayahu went to him, and after Chizkiyahu had received the sign of his healing for another 15 years, then the foreigners from Babel, the sovereigns from Babel came and he showed them everything. And Yeshayahu said, who are these guys? He said, no, they came from Babel. They came. What did you show them? I showed them everything. He said, they're going to take everything away. And so at this time now, through Yeshayahu, Yahweh is saying, firstly, he's saying and making it clear that he is creator of all. There is nothing beside him. And he's basically asking them, I'm your creator, I'm your savior, where's my recognition? Why aren't you acknowledging who I am? Most people are not building in righteousness. They're not being built up as living stones in Messiah. And when he says the heavens are my throne and the earth is my footstool, the Hebrew word for throne comes from the word kiseh, which is a seat of honor, a throne, an authority or an official seat. And it speaks of the throne that a king would sit on as being a symbol of the royal authority over that which he reigns. And it comes from the word kasa, which means to cover, conceal, clothe, hide. So basically, he clothes creation, so to speak, being the one who's seated above all and nothing is hidden from him. So he sits above it all and nothing's hidden, and it's under his wings. He's enclosed it all. So therefore, he knows everything that's going on, and he's coming to his people that should be worshiping him. He's saying, why aren't you respecting my authority of what I am? Tehillah 11 verse 4 says, Yahweh is in his set-apart Hechal. The throne of Yahweh is in the heavens. His eyes see, his eyelids examine the sons of men. We get this similar language. His throne is above all. He can see all. Why don't most people see that? That's really what he was asking his people. The phrase, my footstool, in Hebrew is hadom raglei, which comes from hadom, which is a stool or a footstool, and regel, which is a foot or feet or walk. So the earth is his place for his feet. And that's what highlights his choice to walk with us. He made creation. He's outside everything in creation, but he chose to walk with us and subject himself to what he created so he could be with his created people and be in our midst. And what this clear announcement is declaring in Yeshayahu is who he is, and that there was no submission to walking in him. The people were not obeying. They weren't submitting to his authority. We, as taught ones of Messiah, we recognize that he's in the heavens. And because he's in the heavens, what shall the righteous do? They'll keep being set apart. They'll submit to his authority. Tehillah 99 verse 5 says, exalt Yahweh our Elohim and bow yourselves at his footstool. He is set apart. Verse 9 says, exalt Yahweh our Elohim and bow down toward his set apart mountain, for Yahweh our Elohim is set apart. And when we think of this, the earth is his footstool. What it's saying is, we don't wait for him to, some weird theologies think that everybody's just going to be taken away and we'll all be with him. The earth is his footstool, and we are to bow down to him at his footstool. In other words, as we walk on this earth, we should subject ourselves to him. Because as it is in the heavens, the seat or throne of authority, so it is here where his footstool is, where we are to be walking humbly with him and bowing ourselves in submission to his authority. You know, we are to walk in righteousness. We are to be set apart as he is set apart, as we've been discussing most of the morning. And what verse 1 highlights at the beginning of this chapter is the total disregard for the authority of Elohim. And whatever house was being built, it wasn't his house. You see, if you're building not according to Yahweh's ways, it's not Yahweh's house. Where is this house that you built for me, and where is my place of rest? 1 Chronicles 28 verse 2, Sovereign David rose to his feet and said, "Hear me, my brothers and my people. I had it in my heart to build a house of rest for the ark of the covenant of Yahweh and for the footstool of our Elohim, and had made preparations to build it." I mean, he prepared everything that was necessary. And then when hearts were moved, hearts, not parts, their whole hearts were moved, everyone contributed. So Shlomo had everything he needed to actually build what was required. And in 1 Kings 8, verse 17 to 19, it says, "It was in the heart of my father David to build a house for the name of Yahweh, Elohim of Israel. But Yahweh said to my father David, because it has been in your heart to build a house for my name, you did well that it was in your heart. Only you do not build the house, but your son who is coming from your loins, he does build the house for my name." So these passages that I've mentioned highlight the heart of David. And as we consider this, we must think carefully about when we get to Amos as well, the heart of David and what Yahweh's not necessarily interested in bricks and mortar, but it symbolizes us as living stones, who we are in him. And just as he showed Moshe on the mountain the pattern that he was to do exactly according to what he was shown in the tabernacle and its service, so Yahweh showed David what Shlomo was to make, and David told Shlomo how. That's why when Shlomo made all the things, it was according to what Yahweh told David, because it was a clear picture again of that which is in the heavens, it must be done here on earth. There's no deviation from the authority and throne of Yahweh, which is in the heavens. He's not just up there in the heavens and he's left us to do what we want. He wants us to be subject to him, because his footstool is the earth, which means he takes great care and concern about how we are walking in this earth. It's his creation, not ours. And therefore we can't create anything. It's his creation and we are his subjects. We are his design, and we must function according to that design which he's given us. And verse 1 of Yeshayahu is basically highlighting for us the clear state of a backslidden and corrupt people who were about building their own houses. Their heart was not earnestly seeking after Yahweh. They didn't have the heart of David. And this reminds me of the book of Haggai. The prophet Haggai was also around during the days of Ezra and Nehemiah when they were rebuilding. They started rebuilding the walls after they came back from captivity in Babylon. But then they slipped away after a few threats of the enemies, and everybody got concerned about their own lives and doing their own paneled houses. And in Haggai 1, verse 2 to 5, it says, "Thus said Yahweh of hosts, saying, this people have said, the time has not come, the time the house of Yahweh is to be built." Then the word of Yahweh came to Haggai the prophet, saying, "Is it time for you yourselves to dwell in your paneled houses, and this house be in ruins? And now, thus said Yahweh of hosts, consider your ways." This last chapter of Yeshayahu is a prophetic warning against those who aren't considering their ways. The master builder of all is coming, and those who have been busy building their own lives with no regard for Yahweh and his house shall be destroyed. When our master was here, he went out from the temple, and as he was walking with the taught ones, they were marveling at. I mean, look, from a physical point of view, it had to have been something spectacular to look at. After all, Shlomo did a great job, and they were marveling at this and the design and the quality of the temple, because it was made according to the way it was supposed to. But the bricks and mortar didn't make it what it was supposed to be. It's the function of the people within it is what is supposed to make it. And they were marveling at the work of man's hands, and he says, listen, not one stone will be left unturned. The state of the building might have looked really great, very pretty, spectacular, yet the service was so corrupt that it had no place for Yahweh to put his feet as a resting place. And our master was telling his taught ones that the corrupt man-made houses will be destroyed. In Stephanos, who was stoned to death after witnessing of Yeshua. We read about that in Acts, or might I say chapter 7. He was giving his testimony before the elders and the Pharisees and the religious Pharisees. And he presents this wonderful, clear, historical account of Israel's covenant journey. And he gives them a clear witness of how the service that was taking place in the house of Elohim had become so corrupt that they weren't bearing the proper witness of Yahweh. He quotes this passage from Yeshayahu 66 verse 1. When we read in Acts 7 verse 48 to 50, he says, however, the Most High does not dwell in dwellings made with hands. As the prophet says, the heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. What house shall you build for me, says Yahweh? Or what is the place of my rest? My hand has not made all these. In other words, when it's not according to Yahweh's design, it's not his. And Stephanos was quoting these words from Yeshayahu. He was making it clear that whatever they thought they were building wasn't Yahweh's house, and it wasn't worthy to be the place where Yahweh would come and put his feet. He then proceeded to tell all the religious leaders that they were so stiff-necked, they always resisting the set-apart spirit, and he was basically saying that they were grieving the set-apart spirit through their corrupt worship in a house that they had attributed to actually be a place of Yahweh's presence. And we are reminded in Scripture that we are the dwelling place of Yahweh, built up as living stones in the Master on the rock of our deliverance. And these opening words of this chapter are words of rebuke that were given to people who claim to be children of the Most High. And they were not being properly built according to the standard of Torah. And our Master tells us that we are the branches, he is the vine, and if we stay in him, we'll bear much fruit. He stays in us, and that's a picture of being an obedient house, one that doesn't step out of line. Any deviation from walking in the Torah of Yahweh represents stubbornness, stiff-necked, proud, lofty ones, and highlights people who are actually building on sand, as I mentioned earlier, not on the rock. It won't stand, because when Yahweh does come to set his feet on the set-apart mountain, who will be shown up as being his house? So he was rebuking them here. and again, I said, this is a prophetic chapter in nature of the end time. These words are still alive, where Yahweh's asking the same question. He's still seated on the throne in the heavens. He's coming to put his feet here on earth, and he's asking, well, where's my house that I want to come and inhabit? In verse 2, he said, all these my hands have made, all these that exist. Yet to such a one I look, on a poor and bruised of spirit, who trembles at my word. That's the one that Yahweh is focusing on. That is who becomes the apple of his eye, the one that he's looking to, that he seeks to deliver, that he seeks to help and assist and be a savior to, become their savior. Those who tremble at his word. Those who are walking in humility, humbling themselves before the Master. Because everyone has been made by the hand of Yahweh. Yet he looks not at the proud and lofty ones. We mentioned earlier about Yahweh's not going to look, when he says he looks at, it means he accepts. And we are accepted in the beloved when we obey him, when we submit to him. So what Yahweh does not look at, or what he does not accept, what he does not turn his face to, but rather it's a face of anger that will be turned to there, is the proud and lofty ones, those who show partiality. And the Hebrew word for look is from the verb navat, which means to gaze, pay attention, observe. So in other words, it's written in the causative tense, and it highlights how Yahweh is caused to look upon those who tremble at his word, the humble, the poor in spirit, the bruised of spirit, those who are subjecting themselves to him. That's what causes our action of humility, is what causes Yahweh to look upon us. And the question here of where is the house and place of rest is a picture of Yahweh seeking a place that's ready for him to come and inhabit. Tehillah 34 verse 10 to 1 says, the eyes of Yahweh are on the righteous. 34 verse 10, 10 to 1, we're going backwards. I think it's verse 10. Can you double check that for me? Tehillah 34. The eyes of Yahweh are on the righteous, and his ears unto their cry. The face of Yahweh is against evildoers, to cut off their remembrance from the earth. So you either have one that looks upon you, or one is turning against you. What's it? Tehillah 34 verse? It's not Tehillah 34. No, come on. Thank you for helping me. Let my eyes fix And the face of Yahweh is against evildoers. Sorry, it's Tehillah. So it is Tehillah 34. Knew it was written somewhere. Okay, so it's verse 15 to 16. Okay. So anybody who has my notes or whatever, you can correct that. Now, this is the comforting thing that we have, is that Yahweh looks on the poor and bruised in spirit. The Hebrew word for poor is ani, and it should be still fresh in our mind, because ani, which means to be humbled or oppressed, we understand that he saves the humble people. He brings the haughty low. So we've just come through Yom Kippur, where we also realize we are to be busy with our beings and humble ourselves before the Master. What Yahweh requires of us is to do right, love, loving commitment, and walk humbly with him. That's a position of recognizing his authority, that he is sovereign, that we are to obey him. But when we stand like a Nimrod in the face of Yahweh, contesting his authority, that's proud and lofty ones that he will bring low, because nobody's a match for Yahweh, you know. In the words that David spoke to Yahweh after Yahweh delivered him from the hands of his enemies in the hand of Shaul, in Tehillah 18 verse 27, he says, "You save the afflicted people, but bring down those whose eyes are haughty." We know that Yahweh resists the proud. We know that Yahweh lifts up the meek. And those that tremble at his word are the ones that he receives. They are the ones that he looks upon. And this idea of trembling is not one that you are afraid to draw near to him. It's one that recognizes his authority, therefore doesn't challenge his authority. You know, the Hebrew word tremble, harod, actually means tremble, fearful or afraid. And it comes from the verb to be frightened or afraid. And the true remnant hears and comes trembling at his word. Now, that idea of being afraid is that afraid to be out of line. When you know his authority, you don't want to take chances like a rebellious teenager or what do you call it, the little toddlers that rebel. You know, as we go, we learn through life, even in growing up, various stages of resistance and rebellion that's in the flesh. But those who truly tremble at his word are not ever considering putting their foot out of line. And that's a proper fear and trembling of Yahweh. We are to work out our deliverance with fear and trembling. Now, what's worth taking note of is that we are to tremble at his word, and in doing so, we pay close attention to his word and hearing as we should. The Hebrew word harod is also the place or the name of the place that Gideon and his men camped at. Remember when Yahweh chose Gideon to break down the big Asherah pole and the slaughter place to Baal that his dad had set up? And he did it at night, and Yahweh whittled him down from 30,000 to 300. But in Shoftim 7 verse 1, Yerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose up early and encamped at the fountain of Harod, so that the camp of Midian was on the north side of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. Now the fountain of Harod, En Harod, means fountain or spring of Harod. We know that Harod means trembling or afraid. Now Gideon and his army were gathered here at this fountain of Harod. This was the first testing that would take place, the first sifting from the 30,000 down to 10. And this would be the place that would reveal those who were actually afraid of the task at hand. Because everyone is a bit afraid, off you go, 20,000, Midian was on the north side with the hill of Moreh, and this is wonderful for us to recognize because Moreh means teacher. And we see here, as long as we have the good teacher in our focus, we need not be afraid. We can be standing on the hill of fear, but we're not afraid. And this is a great lesson that we can learn through the journey of Gideon being sifted right down to a number that on a practical level was impossible to come against the Arameans, or the Ashurians, sorry. And so we have a teacher of righteousness, and as trustworthy students who hear God and do his word, we're equipped to face the battles of life. That's why our master says, take courage, he's overcome the world. So as long as we're looking to him, we can be more than overcomers in him who strengthens us, as we keep our eyes fixed on our master and king. And so we understand a wonderful picture here that teaches us about this fear, trembling that is done by a true remnant that come trembling at the word of Yahweh. In the book of Malachi, Yahweh said, where's my fear? And so when he goes on and he talks about, firstly, where's my building? Where's my fear? Similar to Malachi, where's my esteem? Where's my fear? You got vomit all over your tables. It's not my feast that you've got here. We spoke about vomit earlier, and here in verse 3, he goes on, because people that think they're self-righteous, they think they're doing nothing wrong. But he carries on, and when he says, whoever slays the bull strikes a man. So they're bringing their bulls, but they're coming with the wrong heart, because you've already murdered a man. In other words, you're not coming with actually in a place of set apartness and purity. Whoever slaughters a lamb breaks a dog's neck. Whoever brings a grain offering, pig's blood. I mean, the people were so mixed. They were drinking pig's blood. They were eating pigs. This is a clear picture of you're drawing near to him, but it's so corrupt that he hates it. This verse addresses the depravity of the mixed worship. And while the wrong do think their worship is fine, sadly, they're not seeing what it is in the eyes of Yahweh. And to Yahweh, it's an abomination. The slaughtering of the wrong is what's being highlighted here, and it's clearly highlighted as abominable worship that's unacceptable as a form of worship before Yahweh. Mishle 15 verse 8, I think I mentioned earlier, the slaughtering of the wrong ones is an abomination to Yahweh, but the prayer of the straight is his delight. And he who turns his ear from hearing the Torah, even his prayer is an abomination. Now, we must understand that this applies to many who claim to be Sabbath keepers, but they're not wanting to hear the Torah on the Sabbath. But yet they want Yahweh to hear their petitions and their prayers. This verse 3 of Yeshayahu 66 is a picture of abomination that's been rendered still today of a mixing. Because mixed worship is not worship, it's corrupt. It's not set apart worship. And that's what Yahweh delights in, What we take note from this is we see wonderful pictures here that the bull, with the bull, they strike a man. Remember Aharon, when he made a golden calf. In other words, he made an image of a bull in the corrupt worship while Moshe was on the mountain. You cannot bring a peace offering to Yahweh when you've just killed a man, so to speak. That's he's saying. You've struck a man, but you're bringing a bull. And we see the wonderful warning, I don't know if it's wonderful, but the clear warning that Yahweh is highlighting here prophetically for corrupt worship that's being done. And this rebuke that was being done here is a clear exposing of the depravity of hearts that were coming before the master without a proper preparation. Putting on the show before others, but Yahweh sees the heart. And the image of one who brings a lamb breaks a dog's neck is a picture of mixing the set apart and the profane. We know the dog is not a clean animal, and yet it's not clean to eat. It's not to be offered up as food for the fire. And the image of a dog is likened to occultic practices. The dog was worshipped in ancient Mitzrayim, and it was fertility worship that was being done there. We're told in Devarim 23 verse 18, do not bring the harlot fee of a whore or the pay of a dog to the house of Yahweh your Elohim for any vowed offering, for both of these are an abomination to Yahweh your Elohim. The use of the phrase of a pay of a dog is a euphemism for a male prostitute that was used for fertility rites. Something that's strictly forbidden. The lamb is a picture of redemption, and we must never cheapen the master's work by corrupting it with the sins of the world and thinking that, yes, he's the lamb that takes away the sins of the world. He is, but only to those that actually are drawing near to him in the correct prescribed manner.
For me, it's the difference or the contrast between bringing the offering and being cruel.
Yes.
To
breaking, yes.
In your life.
Yes.
In all kinds of ways. If you do that to a dog, you will be cruel to everyone.
It's a nice picture. So you come on a prescribed time, and to everyone else it appears like you're drawing near, but you're not. That's not who you are, because you're cruel in your handling of anything. Okay, get the one about the wrong who's cruel to his animals. Now, the image of one bringing a grain offering with pig's blood. Now, we know this is showing the corruption, because we've spoken many times of the grain offering, the mincha. It's the one offering that doesn't require blood because it's from the ground. It's the grain. And it often represents, it's not for guilt or sin, it's often for fellowship. It's part of the grain offering that was brought with incense and everything else as a remembrance portion. But being brought with pig's blood is another picture of the corruption of a pig, an unclean animal, and bringing pig's blood would profane the offering. Okay.
Actually, just open right there.
There we go. So just share that one.
We said 12 verse 10 says, the righteous regards the life of his people, but the compassion of the wrong is cruelty.
Yeah.
So they don't have compassion.
No. So basically, those that are mixing their worship, that's actually quite a moment for me. Because those that are mixing their worship actually show they don't have compassion. Meanwhile, they're the ones saying, where's your compassion?
They're basically slaughtering.
Yes.
For the sake of slaughtering.
Yes.
For the sake of drawing near. So killing animals.
Yes. So people were just killing animals, but not actually drawing near with a pure heart and compassion of our master. Now, the grain offering, as I said, no blood. This, mixing it with pig's blood, was what the nations were doing in fertility worship. Now, pig's blood defiles the worship. We know that. It was a huge warning then, and it's a huge warning today. Many are defiling their worship by partaking in unclean matters. Pig's blood was something that was used in the initiation of new members as part of pagan rituals of fertility worship. So a lot of people are still doing it today when they drink pig's blood in order to become part of a fraternity, or among other abominable practices that are performed in terms of joining the clubs, so to speak, initiations, etc. Just give you a little bit of history, not so modern. 167 before the Common Era, so a little while ago, King Antiochus IV persecuted the Yehudim. Remember, at that stage, the house of Israel were already divorced and scattered, so it was only the Yehudim. And he persecuted the Yehudim for not adopting Greek religious practices. He commanded the Yehudim to sacrifice unclean animals such as pigs and commit other abominable fertility acts that violated Yahweh's Torah. Antiochus IV believed that his empire would be more secure if all his subjects became more Greek. And in 168, before the Common Era, he issued a decree that would force all his subjects to adopt Greek culture and only worship the Greek deities. This process was called Hellenization, which is to make one Greek. And it was primarily accepted by most who saw the Greek way more advanced and more culturally relevant. So for many people, possibly those that were already mixing their worship and not really that serious, they saw it as, well, we might as well follow that way because look, it's advancement, it's culturally relevant. Isn't that what happens today? How people's standards go away from the word because, well, that's what all are doing now, and it'll be better for us if we do that. So he used that tactic to actually get most people. And any of the Yehudim at the time that refused to submit to the Hellenization process, he issued laws that would destroy them. I just want to read a little bit from Maccabees. People like to quote Maccabees. It's a nice, interesting book. It's encouraging. In 1 Maccabees 1, verse 44 to 50, it says, the king sent letters by messengers to Jerusalem and the cities of Yehuda. He directed them to follow customs strange to the land, to forbid burnt offerings and sacrifices and drink offerings in the temple, to profane Sabbaths and feasts, to defile the temple and the set-apart people, set up altars and sacred precincts and shrines of idols, to sacrifice swine and unclean animals, and to leave their sons uncircumcised. They were to make themselves abominable by everything unclean and profane, so that they would forget the Torah and change all the ordinances, and whoever does not obey the command of the king shall die. And isn't that primarily what Christianity has done? Taken everything out, the Torah, taken all the feast days, the Sabbaths away, convert to our way of doing things, or you won't have salvation. That's their message. And in order to carry this out, the first thing that the Greeks did was capture the temple. They sacrificed pigs on the slaughter place to their pagan deity Zeus, Jesus. Later became quite a revelation to the Greeks to say Jesus, which is not Yahweh or Yeshua. They then forced the Yehudi families to set up slaughter places or altars to Greek sun deities at their homes. Public slaughter places were set up all over the city, and the Yehudim were forced to eat pigs that were sacrificed to Zeus. This image of associating one's grain offering being likened to one who brings pig's blood is the picture of profane worship that was going on, the image of depravity that continues, and the one that's bringing this or burns incense being likened to one who blesses an idol. Because what you're doing is not pure worship, it's idolatry. The Hebrew word for idol, aven, means iniquity, trouble, wickedness, or sorrow. And what we see is, we know that incense, or the slaughter place of incense, is a picture of intercession and prayer. And here, they were making idol worship. We're commanded not to make any molded images. Hosea 10, Yahweh calls Israel a degenerate vine due to the corruption of their false practices. In fact, in Hosea 10, verse 5, it says, the inhabitants of Shomeron, which was the capital of the house of Israel, because of the calf of Beit Aven, for its people shall mourn for it, as well as its priests who used to rejoice over it, because of its esteem that has departed from it. Yahweh called, remember when Yerovam set up for the northern kingdom of the house of Israel, he set up 2 golden calves, one in Beit El, which was the southern border of the house of Israel, and one in Dan, which was the northern border, because he didn't want people to go to Jerusalem, to Rechavam, in fear that his reign would crumble. And he did away with the Levites. He made his own priesthood, did his own festivals, robed his priests in black robes, did away with the pattern of having bright white linen garments for set apartness in service of the priesthood, and having these calves. The house of Beit El, which means house of El, Yahweh in Hosea says the calf of Beit Aven. So basically he's saying Beit Aven is, this house is not the house of Elohim, it's the house of sin. It's the house of iniquity. And what was being rebuked here very clearly in Yeshayahu is that those who think they are the house of Elohim, in Yahweh's eyes, it's the house of sin. It's the house of idolatry. It's the house of corrupt worship. Yahweh hates mixed worship. In Amos 5, verse 21 to 22, he says, I've despised your festivals. I'm not pleased with your assemblies. Though you offer me ascending offerings and your grain offerings, I do not accept them, nor do I look on your fattened peace offerings. He gives the same rebuke in Yeshayahu 1, and people twist these words to say, you see, Yahweh's not wanting your Sabbaths and all your offerings. And he's saying, no. When you don't do it Yahweh's way, it's not his. So what he despises is your festivals, your new moons, your slaughterings. Because Vayikra 23, which we're going to go through next week, tells us very clearly they are Yahweh's festivals. You know, his festivals that we get to rehearse through a gift of redemption that he's provided for those that will actually humbly submit and walk in their way. So Yahweh was basically saying, why are you even bothering coming to me with your offerings, since you have idols in your homes, and all you're bringing into my house is feet that are muddied with falsehood? And that's the same message that's going out today. Stop mixed worship. People were delighting themselves in their abominations. And isn't that what people do today? We are told in Yeshayahu 58 that the Sabbath should be a delight to us. We are to call the Sabbath a delight, you know. But what do people do in their abominable worship? And whatever they're doing on their feast, that's their delight. They delight in the evil. And we must delight in what Yahweh delights. And Yahweh says, you know what? I'm going to choose your punishments and bring their fears upon them. Wow, when I just hearing this again, I mean, we read it over and over, but those words stood out for me now. You know, Yahweh's in control. And Yahweh is the one that says, I will choose the punishment of the wrong. And the wrong, I'll bring their fears upon them. So when you are not walking in the fear of Yahweh, but you're doing your own ways, and you're frightened and afraid of what might happen, Yahweh will let that happen. Because he'll answer you according to the idol of your heart. Yahweh called, nobody was listening. He spoke, nobody was hearing. They did evil before his eyes, and they chose what displeased him. we read earlier from the renewed writings, what is it that pleases Yahweh? It's our set apartness, you know. And so when we look here, Yahweh right through called prophets, sent prophets. People didn't listen. And Yahweh then said, right, now I'm going to choose your punishment. And then he says, hear the word of Yahweh, you who tremble at his word. So this is now a message to those who are trembling at his word, those that Yahweh looks upon and accepts. He said, your brothers who hate you, who cast you out for my name's sake, said, let Yahweh be esteemed so that we see your joy, but they are put to shame. This is actually an encouraging call for the true remnant that tremble at the word of Yahweh to take courage and not be afraid of the persecution that comes for choosing Yahweh's ways and his righteousness. Our master said it very clear, blessed are you when men shall hate you, when they'll cut you off, reproach you, cast out your name as wicked for the sake of the son of Adam. Rejoice and leap in that day. It doesn't always feel like it's easy to rejoice and leap. For look, your reward is great in the heavens, for that is how their fathers treated the prophets. So we need to understand this warning that Yeshayahu 66 is giving us. It warns against the brother who hates us. But yet we're also reminded not to hate our brother. Reprove him for certain, but bear no sin because of him. In other words, don't be led astray to breaking the Torah, because that's a very slippery place to be in. And the roaring cry of Yahweh coming from his hechal, repaying his enemies, this is a clear picture of the judgment coming when he comes out of his set-apart place. And that roar will be heard